Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Wednesday, May 6th, 2020. Thank you for tuning in for this Grand Solar Minimum news update today. We got a little bit to talk about. Let's get started right now with solar wind speeds coming in at 297.8 kilometers per second. That's now twice within the last 7 days that we've seen solar wind speeds below the 300 kilometers per second range. Right now, the density is sitting at a 4.3. And the sun is blank. Yes, you see a spot right there smack dab in the middle of the sun in the southern part of the star, but that is not a sunspot. It is an active region, but it does not possess the qualities for it to be a sunspot. Therefore, we are now 4 days in a row without sunspots. That makes it 95 days here in 2020 without sunspots, 75% of the year, that is. Solar minimum is well underway. Yes, we've had a flurry of activity from our star. Looking at a couple of sunspots the other day, and actually we had 3 different groupings. But even with those 3 groupings of sunspots, it only totaled to the amount of 35. Now, during a solar maximum, when the cycle is at its peak, some of these sunspot numbers will be as high as 30 to 50, and that's just for one sunspot grouping. So again, don't be fooled by the amount of spots that you saw earlier last week and this week earlier. Don't be fooled by that. The sunspot numbers are still relatively low. These are very weak sunspots. In fact, some people would probably argue that these wouldn't even count as regular sunspots in previous year's record. So if anything, maybe SPACEWEATHER and other space agencies are giving us a couple of sunspots that may not have been counted. And that goes back to thinking about the Maunder minimum and the Dalton minimum, and how they monitored and observed sunspots back in those days, back in the 1600s. Sunspots that weren't counted back then because maybe they didn't have the equipment necessary to count these smaller sunspots. And I'm not making any excuses. I'm just saying that we are counting every little tiny speck that comes across that qualifies as a sunspot, where it has negative and positive polarity, and with a dark core as well. Now, again, could observers back then see these tiny little sunspots? And would they be counted, what they're counting today, would that be not counted back in the Maunder and even in the Dalton minimum? So it's something to bring up, because I know there's a lot of people that get misled about how a grand solar minimum works. And a grand solar minimum is a cycle that happens every 206 years or so. And during that cycle, you will see a decline of solar activity. You'll see it bottom out, and then it comes back. Now, the sun just doesn't shut off for 30 to 50 years without a sunspot. That's not how it works. Each cycle within the grand solar minimum will be weaker until it hits the bottom. Once it comes off the bottom, you start to see the cycle pick up again, and we will be out of the grand solar minimum. So, just because we began the grand solar minimum in 2020 doesn't mean we're going to be in solar minimum conditions from now all the way through 2055. No. We will still see solar cycles and weak solar maxes. And what do I mean by weak solar max? Well, basically, we've talked about this before, but when you're talking about solar cycle 24 and the smooth sunspot number was right around 167, 170 for cycle 24. All right, now average is between 180 and 220. So we were a little bit below average. And then solar cycle, that was 23. 24 came in lower around the 140s. And now solar cycle 25 is predicted to be, now this is NASA's numbers, at 115. So that's half of normal. So solar cycle 25 is maximum, is going to be the strength. It's going to be half of what a normal solar cycle is not in a grand solar minimum. So we are just getting started, and we are already seeing all kinds of climate chaos because of grand solar minimum, because of lack of activity with our sun, because of the influence of our oceans and how they affect climate as well. Volcanoes get thrown in the air, natural CO2 release, but a very, very, very complex situation with grand solar minimum. And there's no such thing as a 5-minute answer. There's no such thing. Unfortunately, this is a very complex situation that involves real science and real recorded history of these cycles existing, peer-reviewed papers left and right. Let's go to our space weather section at thegrandsolarminimum.com, our handy dandy website. And I've got it already set up here. Let's check it out. You see low solar output, nothing really happening. KPs between 1 and 2. Hence, that's probably why we saw the powerful earthquake that we saw. Taking a look at our star, well, that little spot down there at the bottom is Earth facing. And if we look at this, guys, this could be a long run of spotless activity. And I say that because, I'll go ahead and zoom this in. Down at the bottom is the panoramic version of our star. So from where 0 is, that's Earth facing. 180 is almost completely on the opposite side, but that area is reported by stereo B, and we never get that. So we have to just take a look at 75% of the pie and figure out what's going to happen. And right now, it's going to be pretty quiet. Not a lot of action, not much happening. So May could be a repeat of April, February as well. Lack of sunspots continuing as this minimum continues. Cosmic rays will continue to go up in our atmosphere, and we'll continue to see these extreme rain events and extreme weather temperature changes that we're experiencing or going to experience this week. All right, let's jump over here real quick at weather.com. May's superflower moon is the last supermoon of 2020. And last night, I don't know if you guys were out and about, but right around 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, an intense moon halo around my full moon sky. I wish I could have grabbed my phone at the time, but I was just kind of looking outside and then heading back to bed, but insane. But the peak of this is coming on Thursday morning. So overnight Wednesday tonight into Thursday morning. We will see it still pretty well by Thursday night as well. So if you've got clear skies on the way, guys, try to take advantage of that situation. We've talked a lot about the moon lately, and I've got a couple of things. Actually, while I'm here, I'll just go ahead and switch to something I found interesting since we've talked about the moon. The Trump administration drafting an Artemis Accords pact for moon mining. This is exclusive. Trump administration drafting the Artemis Accord pact for moon mining. Sources is Joey Roulette. Washington, this is according to Reuters, the Trump administration drafting a legal blueprint for mining on the moon under a new U.S.-sponsored international agreement called the Artemis Accords. People familiar with the proposed pact told Reuters the agreement would be the latest effort to cultivate allies around NASA's plan to put humans in space stations on the moon within the next decade, and comes as the civilian space agency plays a growing role in implementing American foreign policy. The draft pact has not been formally shared with U.S. allies as of yet. The Trump administration and other space-faring countries see the moon as a key strategic asset in outer space. The moon is also of value for long-term scientific research that could enable future missions to Mars. Activities that fall under a regime of international space law widely viewed as outdated. And it goes to read on a little bit more about this, but I kind of want to have an opinion on this after reading this article. And again, this says it's not a territorial claim, according to this statement here. There'll be safety zones. Other countries that do have operations in the future on the moon, there will be designated safety zones. So in other words, stay in your lane, bro. But it's kind of wild to think about that in the future that we're going to be mining on the moon and possibly building space stations for human stations, basically for research, for a halfway point of a fueling station, possibly. I mean, you know, I know when Trump started Space Force, I wasn't sure if that was real, if that was something that was necessary for our country, especially for a military branch. And now we're starting to see more talk and more action about going back into space and going to the moon. I can't imagine that if we get up on the moon and meddle around too much, I can't imagine that there won't be some consequences to face from that. So hopefully this is a process and not just something that we jump right into, which I'm sure that's the case. I mean, we're talking about other world governments that have to coordinate around this event. So, but I thought this was interesting. And since we were talking about the giant supermoon tonight, everybody should check it out. Also, meanwhile, the Trump, as we speak, Trump administration is drafting a legal document for how to mine on the moon. Cannot make this up, people. All right, a 6.8 earthquake today hit the Banda Sea in Indonesia. This was at 13:53 UTC on May 6th. The agency is reporting a depth of 65.5 miles. The EMSC is reporting it as a 6.9 and a depth of 69 miles. Now, there's no tsunami. There was no damage report, no fatality, no injury. Some felt some shaking, moderate shaking also, but mainly light. But this was a deep quake, folks. 6.8, pretty deep. We've talked about Monday, we were under a 24 to 36 hour watch for an earthquake. We were a little off on that one, but we've had some action this week and actually pointed some of that out on Monday's show as well on the amount of stronger earthquakes that we have seen over the past 7 to 15 days. It seems like we're getting more and more 5 points in areas we're not used to seeing earthquakes. And now another 6.9. USGS is calling it a 6.8. And we haven't done this in a while. And a lot of people get really, really triggered by this person here. And so I found this, and I think it's a good example to bring up because so many things today that China is getting off the hook for. And obviously, there is a controversy right now with the current virus, where it originated, how it got out. Was it purposely? Was it accidental? Was it handled wrong? So on and so forth. So a lot of people around the world are already angry with the way that China handled this disaster. And now we have the world's #1 climate activist who wants to sue nations that use fossil fuel. Get this. The reason why, to her claim, is that miners face an increased death and disease as a result of climate change. Therefore, countries that use fossil fuels should face consequences. This was posted on May 6th, today, Climate Change Dispatch. The thing that troubles me, and a lot of people are starting to notice it, is how we've been shut down for March and April, and now we are into May, starting to open things back up. But a lot of astonishing photos that show air pollution has drastically dropped. Now, with that being said, CO2 is still hovering at 415 parts per million. So we haven't seen the CO2 drop And there's been a lot of businesses shut down, a lot of human industrialized emissions that have been decreased because of this lockdown. So 2 months in a row, no action, literally. And the temperatures around the globe are going down. In fact, April is UAH reading was the second largest drop in a 2-month span since record began in 1979, satellite-wise. So we're seeing less human pollution, CO2 levels staying the same and higher, but temperatures are drastically dropping. So there's two things we cite in this article. One, that everyone who burns fossil fuels should be responsible and should face consequences. Everyone. Okay? That's just ridiculous. Therefore, countries that use fossil fuels. What country? We've already talked about this. There's a few cities in the United States that use renewable energy, or what they call renewable. What country out there is on that level already that's using 100% renewable? Let's go ahead and throw biomass in there, because the Green Party says that biomass is renewable, which I disagree with. You're burning a lot of dangerous chemicals that we don't know about. Some of these wood chips, they come in already chopped up. We don't know if it's pressure treated wood or not. Therefore, it gets burned into our atmosphere in a local town, possibly contaminating drinking water as well. I've lived in areas where they have these incinerators, and I can tell you this, guys, I can smell a campfire smell in the water supply. As I was taking showers, you could smell like a campfire from the water. So these biomass, I think they do more harm than good. And just because they're not burning oil or natural gas or coal, that doesn't mean it's green and good for the environment. And I think biomass is one of the biggest air pollution and water pollution contributor out there. But no, this 17-year-old wants to go after all countries that burn fossil fuels. As if we don't have enough to worry about and think about, this gets brought up at a time where no one really is paying attention to climate change activists right now. But since she wants to be put in the spotlight, I figured I'd go ahead and point out that we have seen a huge drop in human emissions, and it has not done anything in the last 2 months to help temperatures. If CO2 rise is still rising and temperatures are dropping, also human emissions have dropped, this AGW theory is falling apart. The one thing that I've always said on this channel, Mari and I both believe this, man does pollute the breathing air and drinking water. And we want ways to have clean water and clean air. We're definitely for that. We definitely believe that man has a hand at putting pollution, air pollution, and water pollution. What we don't believe is that CO2 is a pollutant. So CO2 is not a pollutant. CO2 is life. And the amount of CO2 that's in our atmosphere and the amount that the humans contribute is way, 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 way too small. So I'm going to call it out right here. It's just, she might be bored and needs some attention. It's been a while since we've had to talk about her, but I sit here and shake my head and face palm myself when she wants to sue countries for using fossil fuels, claiming that these fossil fuels are increasing her chance of death and disease. Well, I can tell you this right now. If the problem was really man's industrial CO2, then, like she said several times, why haven't we stopped right now? Why are we waiting? Why is China off the hook? Why is China not included in this lawsuit? They are 30% of the globe's emissions. So why isn't China included in this lawsuit? Argentina, Brazil, France, Germany, Turkey, they've all been signaled out. But no words of India or China or anywhere else that might have a large amount of industrial production in its country. But India and China are probably the two biggest in the world, and they're left off the hook. Why? Why is it? And this is how we all know that the AGW is a scam. Why? Why is China and India off the hook, guys? Because they sure pay them carbon credits real nice. That's right. This is all about money. If you can pay that carbon credit, do what you want. Do what you want, because it's going to line the pockets of these politicians that push these regulations. And then that money that goes into pockets like Man, Bear, Pig, and GS and all of them, they filter that money through activists like her. This is what keeps their propaganda alive. They filter that money down to the little people. And they hijack this person here, you know. I've never had a problem with her. She's been hijacked. Her childhood has been stolen from her. Although I will argue that she's met several world leaders, traveled to the United States by boat over the Atlantic. I mean, I don't know if that's really considered a terrible childhood. I mean, my gosh, everybody knows who she is. She's probably one of the most famous people in the world. So I don't buy that whole my childhood is ruined. And that's why I think this whole thing is an act, obviously. And like I said, she gets funded. Her parents get funded big time by people who have a lot of money, who stand to make money off of things like Beyond Meat and, you know, solar and wind. But yeah, so 30% of the global emissions come from China, but they're not going to be cited in this lawsuit. They're allowed to do whatever they want because they pay. It's all about money. And that's why we know that man-made climate change is phony. Because if our planet was really in a climate emergency, let's compare it to the virus. We have a health emergency. So what do? They shut down the schools. They shut down businesses. They shut down restaurants and bars. And everybody stay inside. Don't come out. This is an emergency, a health emergency. And yet you have all these people like her and other activists who say we are in a climate emergency, a climate crisis, that the cause of climate change is man's addiction to fossil fuels. So if the scientists were so sure about this health emergency and took action right away, they didn't play around. This obviously, to me, says it's real. But when you have climate change folks who think that man is causing it and that we are going to kill our planet in the next 12 years if we don't do something about it, but we don't do anything about it, you know, I kind of feel like secretly that I kind of feel like secretly that she never wanted to do this. What a waste of her time. The hypocrisy that's involved. What a waste of her time. Because it's not real. If it was, and she said this many months ago, if this was such an emergency, then why aren't we acting? Why are we saying we can't let this happen to our children? We got to save the planet for our children's sake. We got to do it. But why aren't we doing it? Because it's not real. Climate crisis is fake. This whole CO2 garbage is fake. They're covering articles about the ice melting. Fox News, ridiculous. They don't know what they're talking about. The guy that authored an article on Fox News was talking about, you know, climate change is causing all this ice melt on the western side of Antarctica. They didn't mention the eastern side, by the way, which is super thick and cold and growing, strong. They didn't mention that side. They just mentioned the side where the volcanoes are going off underwater. But again, I checked the author on that, and it's written by some guy who doesn't follow climate. He just had to turn in a writing assignment that day and decided to cover, you know, the ice melting in Greenland, the ice melting in Antarctica. It said, the title even said, images from space are showing more than ever how clear how much ice we've actually lost. And I mean, the funny part is there's no images included in the article that show pictures of Greenland from space and Antarctica that show like the headline claims anyway. It's all hype. It's fake news. Even from Fox News, those folks don't know what they're talking about when it comes to climate change. Even Rick Perry. Rick Perry doesn't believe in man-made global warming, but Rick Perry still believes that man affects the climate. So, I mean, good job for halfway getting it right that, that we're not global warming, but, I mean, man still affects climate. Now, obviously, when you pick a guy to be your advisor, your energy advisor, you expect him to be well-versed on subjects like climate change, because hand in hand, energy and climate change, those topics are brother and sister, in my opinion. And when you got a guy who's in charge of the energy sector and who claims doesn't believe in man-made global warming, but believes in man causing climate change, these guys are confused. They're not being briefed, or they're not paying attention. Or maybe they should hire an assistant to help them with this. I mean, hands down, if I didn't have Mari to bounce off ideas, or her reading papers to me, or her helping me understand what some of this stuff is, this channel would nowhere be as informative or accurate, period. So there's nothing wrong with having a brain assistant that can help you understand, so you don't look like a monkey when you go on the air and talk about this stuff. And just another classic misrepresentation of climate change. This is all about money. Let's sue, sue, sue. So here's what's going to happen. They're going to win their lawsuit, and they're going to make these countries pay a certain amount of money that goes into a fund or a tax because they burn fossil fuels. That's right. This is just another way to award countries around the world who are fighting for climate change to, this is going to benefit those green policymakers out there. It's going to line their pockets. And then Man, Bear, Pig, and GS can pay off people like her and help carry out their lives. Again, you can't attack her. My opinion, she's been hijacked by her parents, by political leaders. Money is the what do you call it? It's the person that's driving the car right now. Is money. It's driving the car. All right, let's move on. Still talking about climate change? Ban plastic bags. No, never mind. What's this all about? Well, I can tell you I live in a state that started this banning plastic bag nonsense. Actually, it started in Massachusetts earlier this year. They were using biodegradable bags, very thick plastic. I mean, they were thick. So we ran through so many in a day. They, the thin ones, it just seems like you get a stack of 100 and it's like 2 inches thick, if that. 2 inches thick of these plastic bags, well, that's like 10. So you find yourself constantly changing out bags or whatnot, right? Using the new bags. And then when you run out of the plastic bags, well, it's back to paper. And originally what this whole thing was for was that they wanted people to bring their own bags in. All right. That would be a better solution, right? Let's just bring our own canvas bags. Forget about cutting trees down. Forget about making biodegradable plastic wannabe bags. Let's just bring in those canvas bags. Well, that now is not a good idea either, due to bacteria that these canvas bags carry, the germs, with the virus going around. People are like, all right, let's just hold off on that. So guess what they're doing? And Mari and I got to see this firsthand. Plastic bags are back. We had a grocery order delivered to us, and sure enough, we saw plastic bags for the first time in a long time. And I I think Mari and I were both kind of looking at each other like, what's this about? And I said, well, they probably don't care. You know, rules are probably different since we're in a pandemic, or they ran out of the other bags and now they're just using what they have. But no, it's plastic is now being deemed safe again. But governors and mayors are vowing to re-ban plastic once the COVID is over. Yeah, get that. So, interesting stuff there as far as let's ban plastic because it's causing damage, it's causing problems, it's all, you know, look, if anything, yeah, it's pollution, trash. A lot of folks throw them away or throw them out a window. You go through low income areas, these bags litter everything. They're all over the place. I get it. But don't make it about climate change. Don't make it about saving the planet. Yes, we're saving the planet from trash and pollution, but we're not saving the planet from climate change. Because if this did have something to do with climate change, then no matter what, they wouldn't let it happen, right? Just like with the health emergency, they're not letting people leave their homes. That's a real health emergency when you see action like that. But when you hear climate crisis, but no action taken against the things that are being accused, it's fake. There's no climate crisis. This is all about money. Money, 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 money. Check this out. Calgary ties its longest streak below 20 degrees Celsius, 68 degrees Fahrenheit for you Americans out there. And this is recorded in history. So if it's tied, which is, I'd have to re-update this information. This story is not as new as I thought. I apologize, folks. It was posted yesterday, but these numbers run all the way till April 28th. So if they had another day over 68, which that's something I could probably look up. Mari, I don't know. Would you be willing to maybe find a history of temperature in Calgary on April 29th and April 30th? Wanted to see if it's 20 degrees Celsius or lower. But obviously, we're seeing these solar minimum cycles produce some cold weather, obviously. And 219 days, September 23rd of 2019, all the way to 2028 is a tie of 219 days. So April 29th, April 30th, one of those 2 days, actually April 29th, temperature of 68 degrees Fahrenheit or less.
Average, low, or high?
Just a high temperature for that day, if you can somehow find it. I know that's not the easiest task. But again, 219 days of temperatures below 68. Colder in theory, yeah. We had the 6th longest stretch back in the last minimum cycle. Before that, we didn't see really that kind of cold again. 215 days, that was in the previous two minimum cycles before the 2009. And then you got to go way back, like 1911, 1919, 1906. We saw quite a few years of stretches of temperatures where they stayed below 68 for 219 days or more, or less, I'm sorry. The record is 219. We're talking 215, 214, 212. Those records could be crushed this year, and we could see a few more years within this decade that could easily tie or break previous records. So some chilly temps. And I've talked about this before on previous shows as well, where, we're seeing snow earlier in the year and later in the spring. I mean, we're talking about temperatures, but we also have snow records to worry about as well. And I like how in this article here on SOT, we do get solar cycle activity to be included in why we're seeing what we're seeing. And there you see down at the bottom accurately, solar cycle 25. Let's go ahead and zoom that in a little bit. So check out where that little peak is. And I'll scroll all the way over. Now, in my opinion, that's exaggerated. In my opinion, a little bit. I mean, that's under 50. I don't think it's going to be that weak. I think solar cycle 26, that could be one of the weakest solar cycles we've seen in a long, long time. Meaning not much of a max. And 25 is not even going to be half as normal. Any luck on that, Mar?
If you're looking for the maximum high for Calgary on the 29th, it would have been 71.
Oh, so
what are they using one-day anomalies for? I don't really. Why are we focusing on one day? I wasn't listening.
They went 219 days in a row of 68 degrees or lower. So from September 23rd of 2019 through April 28th, they tied the all-time streak of having 219 days.
Why am I seeing the historical average for the most part in April's in the 50s?
I think what they're trying to point out is that we're well above 68. What's the average in May right now? And look up September as well.
Anything else here? Looking up stuff. I got May. What do you want to know about May?
What's the average on May?
Average in May?
Yeah.
For just an average?
Right.
You're looking at about in the 60s, low 60s. So low to mid at most.
So let's look at what we have for September. What's usually the average?
Oh, you want me to go back to last year?
Yeah.
Well,
the point is, you can still see an anomaly temperature of above 68 degrees in April or May.
All right, so September, it looks like last year. I don't have the average for that. That's a different reporting that I'm looking at, but just glancing at the things, anywhere between high 6. I don't know. They had, like last year, Canada had a day where it was, the low was 29 degrees. And let's see what the highest temperature was. And they had one day that was 70, actually a couple days that were 77. So, between just that small 30-day period, you're looking at beautiful 77 degrees, which is what in Celsius? I don't have a conversion in front of me, but and then ending the month going into October, 30s, 29s, 40s.
So
I just think it's hard to say anything about temperatures on a short-term basis. Like the important part of the temperature bit needs to be recognized as a long-term trend. These one-day, short-term anomalies, I'm not, into that much, Jake. Sorry.
Well, and I was on the fence about covering the article. I'm like, well, that goes hand in hand with my early snow in September and staying cold throughout the whole year through April, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like, though, I'm kind of glad you looked that up. Way to debunk my story. But this was from a website that, usually can be a little sensational. I don't know. Not all the time, but sometimes things get a little bit taken out of context, I believe. So that's what I get. I should have just listened to my gut. But yeah, not that big of a deal, but a big deal, I guess.
It's a scary world out there.
Not that big of a deal, but a big deal. All right, softball-size hail pounds parts of northwest Arkansas, shattering windshields. Yeah, huge softball size. My God. What is that, 2.5, 3 inches in diameter? Yeah, well, it didn't mess around, causing lots of car damage, roof damage, It's saying in Little Rock it measured in 1.5 inches diameter. There was a lot of hail, actually, parts of Texas as well. This cold front that we're getting right now, which I'll go into here in a minute. Temperatures were 82 degrees on Monday, dropped to 67 by Friday. That's pretty chilly for, first week of May. And we're talking about a high of 67 degrees in Little Rock. So let's get right on it, huh? Real quick. Now let's do the weather part, and then I'll go into the crop report. We'll save that before we go into GFS. Cold snap. This weekend. It's already starting, though. Parts have cooled down. We had a beautiful, beautiful weekend. And quickly, we have now cold air ushering that away. What's causing this? Well, I hate to sound like a broken record from Friday and Monday, but we do have a weaker polar vortex. And you have to wonder if some of these volcanic eruptions that we've had throughout this year so far doesn't have something to do with why we're seeing cool temperatures right now as well. Friday and Saturday is going to be 15 to 25 degrees below normal. Frost and freeze risk are at the best. And snow in the Great Lakes in the interior northeast. Yeah. So it's going to ridge and fridge, but ridge on the wrong side, fridge on the other side. East Coast, Great Lakes. Temperatures in the 20s and 30s early Saturday morning. Look at this. Real field temperatures waking up. If you live in parts of Pennsylvania, it's going to feel like 10 to 20 degrees outside. Thankfully, you have to live in Canada to get the 0 to 10 feel. 20 to 30 will be widespread from Cincinnati all the way through the Northeast. Back parts of the Northern Plains as well. A very, very, very large swath to get in the 30s and 40s. This far south in this part of the year is also pretty amazing. There's your frost freeze warnings. Potential risk for frost freeze. Take a look at snowfall on the latest time of the year. Well, Burlington, Vermont, May 9th, 1966, they got 3 inches of snow. They could rival it. We are expecting 1 to 3 inches of snow. And you see that blue swath right there, right? So let's take a look at some other ones. Binghamton, New York, 1.7 inches. Definitely could rival that this weekend. But May 18th, 2002. Some of these other dates, May 25th, that's impressive. Pittsburgh, 1/2 inch of snow. Buffalo picked up 1/10 of an inch on May 20th. That's still pretty late too. So we might not be breaking or smashing any late season snows, but you can see how close we are to getting to that really extreme late snow of the year. Like we don't get snow this time of year. It's getting closer and closer like that. Every year it seems like we have snow chances that last longer and longer through the year. I'm really worried that we don't see temperatures where they need to be here in the Northeast and parts of the Great Lakes. And that could mess with a lot of crops and local gardens and farms as well. All right, let's take a look. Speaking of crops, let's take a look at what we're looking at so far that's been planted for corn. And we're up in Colorado. We're up in Illinois. Compared to last year, guys, I mean, we were awful. Last year was 10% in Illinois. Right now, we're at 56%. Now, how do you know if that's above average or if it's just right where it's supposed to be? Well, take a look at the 5-year average right next to it. 54% is normally planted over 5-year average in Illinois. So they're slightly ahead. Colorado is way ahead. 21% is usually the amount planted by now. Another state that's ahead from last year and the 5-year is Indiana. Kansas also improving, but right where they should be for the 5-year average. Kentucky ahead for both last year and the 5-year average. Michigan, very weak, but still right where they should be, 11%. Last year, they only had 3% in the ground. Minnesota, man, you guys, I know you're loving this. 76% planted already in Minnesota. Last year was 5%. The 5-year average, 36%. So these guys got to work early, in my opinion, because of how bad it was last spring. These guys got to work as soon as they could in these fields. to have 76%, and last week we had 40%. So these are huge numbers. The 5-year average in Minnesota is 36%. We're killing that by 40% right now. So job well done for you farmers in Minnesota. North Carolina, you're up. Nebraska, you're up from last year and the 5-year average. Good stuff there. So good news for corn crops here in the United States. I mean, even South Dakota's getting in on it. 38% planted. Last year this time, 0. Ohio, North Dakota is probably the only one that's not showing off right now. In fact, North Dakota is struggling. They're only at 4% planted. Their 5-year average is 15 or 19%. I'm sorry. So it's off by 15%. Corn emerged still a little early. North Carolina, though, doing well. They're up 5% on their 5-year average. Kentucky is also up 9% on their 5-year average. Kansas is slightly down. Illinois is slightly down, and then Indiana right where it should be for the 5-year average. Now, soybeans. Usually last year we had a really good year with the soybeans being planted. They were a little late as well, but rebounded nicely towards the end. In fact, soybeans did way better than the corn crop when it came to planting and harvesting. Right now, Arkansas is right where they should be, better than last year, but a little under on the 5-year average. Illinois is ahead on percentage of soybeans planted, almost double that in their 5-year average. So good year so far for them. Indiana having a great year. Iowa is well up as well. 46% soybeans planted, 9% is the 5-year average for this time during crop season. So good news so far for the majority of our farmers. If you look at this, I know Matt was a little concerned. Our friend Matt in Nebraska was concerned for a drought. Hadn't had much rain, and then the other day they got like 1.5 inches. And he said the best part about that 1.5 inches of rain was that it wasn't destructive. It was well needed. It was nice. If you've ever heard of rain being described as nice, well, Matt did. So anyway, but yeah, so far, good news on American crops so far. The thing that you hate to see, and I mean you as our viewers, is when we're watching the nightly news and we're seeing crops being wasted, thrown away because they can't sell it. They can't meet the demand. There is no demand. So they don't have a bunch of produce that's supposed to be sold to restaurants and grocery stores. If you live in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, West Virginia, Illinois, not the best conditions for farming. The South, you almost get a full week of suitable days of field work. Across the Central Plains, you get a full week almost. So we're in pretty good shape for the most part compared to where we were last year, guys. Last year was freaky. And I know there was a lot of concern this year for No Plant 2020. And look, the year is still young. I mean, we could easily get some pretty bad weather, some pretty nasty stuff. Flooding could wipe out whatever gains we've had early on. So again, I don't mean to come running through the cornfield celebrating here, but it's a good thing to see it on a good start compared to last year. And a lot of these other 5-year averages are getting crushed as well. All right, let's take a look at some weather. This radar information goes from May 6th all the way out till the 22nd of May. I'll go ahead and read you guys what we are thinking here over the next several days, over the next couple of days. This evening and tonight, this is for the UK. Generally clear and chilly with a risk of some patchy frost in the north and east. Cloudier and milder in the southwest with a chance of showers. The cloud and showers extending north to other western parts by Thursday morning. On Thursday, rather cloudy in the west and north with brief brighter spells and further showers. Elsewhere, early fog patches rapidly clearing to warm sunshine, but with thunder showers developing by the afternoon. And the outlook for Friday to Sunday, many places dry and warm with sunny spells, scattered thunderstorms in the south, rain in the far north, however, turning heavier as it spreads south with much colder weather following. So looks like the UK is going to experience a cold snap this weekend, as well as the United States. Moderate to heavy rain expected in parts of northern UK by late this week and next week as well. So All right, let's check out what we're looking at for our lower 48 forecast. And it's a little bit of light rain moving through the northeast right now. Nothing really to write home about. Snow and rain for parts of Montana, and sharing that with Alberta as well and BC. But then we get a pretty decent system on May 8th. Actually, kind of gets really revved up early May 8th into midday May 8th. We could see some severe weather this weekend from this cold front that's going to be dipping through. Look at that. That's light snow, folks, up there in northeast Ohio. Parts of the Maine and Canadian border also dealing with snow showers on the 8th. And then a pocket of persistent snow showers possible for Pittsburgh. A pocket of snow showers possible for Pittsburgh. How about that? And then more rain in the higher elevations. Snow will fall. Rain across the south. Dry weather across the central plain states by this weekend, but chillier. And much, much colder air moving into the northeast. Snow along the I-95 corridor on Saturday. It still looks like Boston's not going to be part of that, but light snow, if any, that falls. And then we've got this system that's leaving that will be bringing light to heavy snow in parts of New York. Now, believe it or not, guys, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, we're all looking at a chance of 1 to 3 inches of snow by Saturday morning. All right, 1 to 3 inches. 6 inches will be the storm max. 6 inches of snow is possible in parts of Maine. Look at the Gulf, by the way. Gulf is churning with some action. South Florida is about to get bombarded. And as we move through early next week, more chances for snow in the Great Lakes. Light, though. Rain again for the northeast. Dry across the central plains. Again, not a lot of craziness. Moderate rain shower, just what they need in the central part of the United States for next Wednesday and Thursday, as a possibility of some more severe weather by next Friday could form for parts like Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas. But again, high pressure is trying to take hold, and man, look at these weird drops and dips here in the jet stream. You could definitely tell something is not awry here, or something has gone awry, I should say. So we get about 3 to 4 systems through the next 2.5 weeks that will attempt to wreak havoc. Let's take a look at how our temperatures are looking. Do we see any improvement after this past weekend? After this weekend, are we going to see an improvement? We'll find out. There's the 4th. Then we're on the 5th. There's the 6th. The deep south staying hot. That colder air starting to filter further south. 50s across most of the Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky areas. And then we get that really cold weather Thursday in the northeast. Overnight, temperatures dropping below freezing on Friday, rebounding in the 40s and 50s for the majority part of the Midwest. This is chilly stuff here for May 8th. Happy birthday to my mom on May 8th, by the way. And freezing conditions, once again, for the northeast, a big pocket of freezing conditions on the 9th. And that's where we'll see our snow overnight Friday into early Saturday morning. And then after that, do we see a rebound? We see a lot of cold in Canada. Look at this, May 11th. Good grief. Northern Plains and Great Lakes are next. That really mild stuff is staying way far south. And really anywhere that's resembling any kind of normal spring temperatures is in the deep south in Texas, parts of the Arizona desert. But this is well below average temperatures here for most of us in the Midwest and the Northeast and parts of the Northern Plains as well. And then we start to see a little bit more of a warm up in late mid-May, but then another cold front being pushed down from Canada by the end of the month. Temperatures trying to get to the 60s and 70s all over the United States, but the Northeast is going to stay stubborn and in the 50s and 60s. Now we start to see some 70s by the end of the month, and there you have it. So we are going to be teased with spring. I'd say for this time of year, we should be well into the 60s and 70s for the most part of the United States. And this weak polar vortex has really changed a lot of things. So we are not going to see a typical May this year. Tornadoes could still go up as we have temperatures in the oceans getting warmer. We'll see more of that Gulf moisture combined with that cold air. This could be some record-setting severe weather events happening in the south moving forward. We're not that far away from hurricane season. We still got some time, but again, interesting to see how things will play out for the rest of the month of May. It doesn't look like anything to write home to. All right, Mari, did you want to say hello to anybody before we sign off the air today?
How's this audio setup working, Jake?
Sounds pretty good.
You can hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good. Well, let me just pull up my note thingy, Bob. Here. I wasn't ready. I wasn't on time, I guess. Taterbug, welcome. You are our latest member on YouTube. Thank you very much for joining as a paid subscriber. So we're very humbled by everyone's support. This channel is member funded. You guys are what keeps us going. If you'd like to become a member, you could do so on YouTube or Patreon. Also, there's a link on our website to do it through PayPal. And I was just sharing around on the social media my latest and greatest shirt, Jake.
Nice.
For space enthusiasts and those who would like to social distance from the virus. It says, it's a shirt that says, just give me some space, Jake. Just give me some space. And it's decorated with spacey things from the universe and what else? The coronavirus.
Oh, boy.
Clever. It's like two birds with one stone, Jake. Give me some space. If you get it. It's only for the clever, I guess. But the shirt's there, and, you know, to welcome the new shirt in, I put a 10% off promo code COVID on the whole site. So everything on our Teespring store is 10% off with the code COVID. Jake.
Well, thank you. It's been a while since we had a t-shirt made, and good to see you back with those creative juices flowing, and hopefully you guys take advantage of the 10% off on the new shirt. But
I did tweet it out on Twitterland, and it's also posted on our Facebook page on Facebook.
You put it on the Facebook page?
Yeah, can you imagine the Facebook page on Facebook?
Did you put it Twitter?
I tweeted on Twitter.
Oh. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mari.
Monday here, so.
It is
know it's just shut up now. I love everyone in the chat. Y'all are wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you, Mari, very much. Again, guys, check out your new GSM shirt. Give me some space, yo. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you for tuning in for this Grand Solar Minimum update. We'll be back Friday at 4 p.m. with another Grand Solar Minimum update. Be sure to join us on our sister station, WTF Sky, Friday night and Saturday as well. We'll do another edition of the Weird News on Saturday night. And then we'll do a call-in open topic on Friday night. And then next week, we have a special guest, Jesse, who's from Wisconsin. We're going to do a little show talking about some tips on growing and gardening. Jesse is a well-trusted source, so we're going to do a little a recording with him on Tuesday, and Mari will edit it and make it look pretty and put it out on our channel sometime next week. So that should be some good stuff. We're getting right into the peak season of our gardening, and what better way to celebrate that than have some good gardening advice. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks again for tuning in. Remember to like and share, and please subscribe. And we will talk soon, guys. Take care.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform. Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.